I'm thrilled. I'm honored, humbled to have an opportunity to interview my next guest. Is somebody who I've been lucky enough to see her perform at the best stage, which is the Olympic stage. Somebody who's done it, not only been there, but done it at a high level, has, medaled for this country. Just a fantastic story. I'm grateful for her time. I just want to introduce my next guest, Carolyn Burckle. Thank you and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Carolyn, talk to me a little bit, and we'll just get, the things that I want to get out of the way. Your journey of coming from Kentucky all the way to University of Florida. You know that I'm a Florida State fanatic. Talk to me a little bit about, that transition from coming from Kentucky to Gainesville, Florida. Can't imagine those being similar, but somewhat. And then obviously performing at such a high level when you came into your freshman year for the Florida Gators.
Yeah, so I graduated high school 2004. I knew immediately when I was in the recruiting process that I wanted to be a Gator, or I wanted to be somewhere by a beach, close enough to a beach. Growing up as kids, we were always in Florida every year. We went to Seaside, Florida every year, and we'd road trip down and spend a couple weeks there. And so I knew that I wanted to be there. And my second choice was Arizona, but I just needed green. I needed green and palm trees. I loved Florida. It's not super different than Louisville by way of small town feeling. So, they've both grown immensely since, but I felt such a culture and a community at Florida. And I felt like I could stretch myself and be better than what I was in Louisville. And I really liked that the team trained together, co-ed. So the men and women trained together. That was big for me. I really enjoyed training with guys. I have two brothers. I trained with all guys growing up. It felt like that was a very easy transition into that. So I was there, my 4 years. I did a victory lap fifth year, but right after my fourth year, my career had gone up and down, and my sophomore year wasn't so great. And then once I got into my junior and senior year, I started becoming a different version of myself where life was a little bit different. It's not just, you're such a good performer, get up and do the thing. It's like, now there's like recovery, and you're getting a little bit older, and you're tired, and you've put in all this training, and there's like, personal life stuff, and there's school, and there's degrees, and there's all these things that were added. So, I performed well. And then right after my senior year, I won NCAAs, and then I made the Olympic team right after my senior year. So it was like a back-to-back thing. But yeah, it was a very up and down 4 years. I mean, I think it could take me 5 hours to talk about all of it, from top to bottom. But, I learned a lot of lessons about, just about everything, but a lot of lessons in self-worth now that I look back on it during that time. And a lot of lessons on my patterning that I can look back at and see, and what makes a great athlete, what makes a competitor isn't always what people think it is. It's not always just hard work in the pool, or, just hard work in one way. Like, I'm really realizing all the different things that go into someone that's trying to achieve something. Yeah.
When did you know that you were destined for greatness? I mean, let's call it for what it is. Getting a scholarship for swimming is very competitive, especially when you consider the schools that you were trying to get into, or that you got into. When did you then say, okay, this is a pretty nice stage? How do I then, consider mentally, how do I get ready for that Olympic stage?
My senior year of high school, I went to the Olympic trials in Long Beach, California, and I was seventh or eighth in the 400. And I knew then that I wanted to make the next Olympics. I had this weird superstition that if I talked about my goals, or if I talked about what I wanted to do, that it wouldn't happen. And it's so interesting reflecting on that now. And I'm a very, you'll maybe learn in this conversation, I'm a very abstract thinker. Like, I don't have a linear thought process. I can follow a linear thought process really well when other people direct it at me, but the way that I process things like is over here and here and here and here and here, which
Nice.
is interesting. I think a lot of athletes are told that they need to be straight and linear with that, and I am not. So I knew that I could be great, but I thought, oh, if I say it, if I manifest it, if I say it out loud, then I am not going to be great. I will jinx it, which I have learned over time that is a protection mechanism against failure. And that is a way that I can make sure that I don't say these things, because I didn't really believe that I was going to be great, apparently, because I thought I would fail, and then everybody would know that my goal didn't come true. And then I was embarrassment, right? So it was this people pleasing thing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I knew I was going to be great then. I knew I could do it. I have a very natural and innate and like primal instinct in the water, and this feeling of confidence. So I think that carried me through a lot of my career in a lot of ways, because it's just such a natural feeling for me to be in the water. I was able to process my emotions, process everything. Like it felt, it's hard to explain. Like it's very difficult to explain, but I feel very powerful in the water, more powerful than any other like place in the world or in my life.
So great.
Yeah. So it doesn't even matter what it is. It's just, I just do. So, anyway, back to your point, I think that was when I first realized it. And then when I got to college and I did really well my freshman year, I then understood that I could be great. But it's never just one decision that you make. It's not just, oh, I'm going to be great now, I'm going to make the Olympic team. So like, okay, now I'm going to do it. You know, it's not just one decision. It's like a series of commitments to yourself over and over and over again. Like you can have the spark, but you have to actually like light the fire, buy into that spark for that to actually happen, or else it's just an idea and it's just, you know, fleeting motivation in that moment, or something juicy to catch on to that's not really sustainable. But so I made a choice of those decisions throughout my transition into college and through my freshman year, that's what I wanted.
When you look at like differentiating factors, even for me now as an entrepreneur, I mean, I think that, you know, for the most part, if in order to get out of the gates, you have to work hard, right? And I'm just trying to, you know, tie this into your world as a swimmer. I think that most all collegiate swimmers, they can all swim at a high level and be really good. What differentiates them, just like what differentiates an entrepreneur, is like the mental component, right? Yeah. Mindset, grit, your ability to overcome obstacles, you know, being resilient. How do you identify, or which one of those 3 or 4 that I just mentioned, which do you identify with best? Grit, mindset, overcoming obstacles, or resilience?
It's a great question. My first inclination and my first thought is like a cocktail of all of them.
Great. I love that answer.
Yeah, I think I'm exploratory. Like I'm curious. I don't feel like I buy into one thing as an answer typically. But if I had to say if it swung in one direction the most, it's resilience. I think I was faced with a lot of obstacles that a lot of people don't even really know about. And it wasn't something that was very fun for me, but it was a very challenging thing for me to understand that my self-worth isn't based on my performance and based on making other people happy. So I would say my resilience came from overcoming those types of obstacles over and over and over and over again. Versus just failure in the pool. Like, sure, but that's not everything. Like when you see an athlete fail on the court, in the pool, on the field, whatever it is, that's not just the start and the end of the moment. Like there's other things that go into that make them resilient other than just overcoming that one bad play, bad swim, bad effort, whatever it may be. I think that we're starting to realize that now in our culture, that athletes are humans and there's more depth to what they're experiencing, and usually things all play into one another. So if they have a bad game or have a bad swim or whatever, it's not just that moment. There's things that lead up to that. There's fears and doubts and insecurities and maybe lack of attentional focus and lack of skill development. And, there's so many different things that lead up to a quote unquote failure that it's such a learning tool for people to be resilient for. So I would say resilience, because I had a lot of like little things that just kept adding up that I hadn't really tended to, because I thought that my natural ability could just take over, and it doesn't really all the time,
Sure.
It can provide you with that why, but it's not always going to be like, oh, sure, I'm just that good, I don't need to like worry about all these other things. So if that makes sense.
Totally. How much does I understand time in the pool, as a former ultra marathoner, Ironman, they talk about like time in the saddle, time in the water. How much time in, I hate to say like therapy or just like this mindset coaching that you hear that a lot of athletes now are incorporating into their treatment does I guess USA Swimming offer something where like, we're training. I'm always fascinated with how much we want to train our bodies, but how, little we do of training our minds. And is that a component that you guys were offered, and did you excel in that area? Did you like that?
No, it was very hush hush. That was not a conversation. I would say the conversation started happening when my brother was competing in the Olympics, like 2012. Like that was when it was more prevalent. That's essentially why we created our business, is just to develop that side of it further for the youth, so that when they do get older and understand what that is, they're able to take that and transfer it into whatever they're doing at a higher level than starting from scratch at age 20.
Yeah.
But there are services, but there were not that many when we were competing. Let's put it that way. It wasn't very talked about. It wasn't highly encouraged to go see a sports psychologist. We had one at the Olympics, but it was more, our mindsets were geared toward, oh, you have a problem, then you need to talk to the sports psychologist. It's not like a daily practice. It wasn't like you work on mindset even when you don't have a problem. Like you work on cultivating that, you understand different parts of yourself, different parts of what it takes to perform in sport, how whatever you think about will come into reality, you sort of get it, but it's just like, it was more of a damage control mindset. Yeah. Like that's what we were taught even as kids growing up, is it's like, you see a psychologist when you have a problem. Like you see this when like you need help, and you ask a sports psychologist after you've had the bad swim, after you're depressed, like after all these things. You don't do anything as like just a natural thing to cultivate this kind of lifestyle on a regular basis, regardless or if there's a problem or not.
Yeah.
So it has evolved. Let's put it that way. 10 years ago, it was not where it is now. And trust me, I've wrestled with that a lot. Like, how much better could I have been, or how much more could I have done? Or,
no doubt.
So it's so incredibly important. And I'm so glad that they're now gearing that more toward elite athletes. Like that's more of a practice, like working with a psychologist on regular basis is more of a practice in training than it was 10 years ago. For sure.
Caroline, before we move on to Rise Athletes, which I think is just amazing, just your platform for, as you said, to better prepare youth for this particular topic. What is the one, memory that you still can double click on from the 2008 Olympics? You say, man, I was a part of that. That's so crazy that I was a part of that.
Aside from the medal on the relay and being able to perform in front of the world, which was so cool, especially with my best friend. Like my best friend is on that relay, and we've been best friends, since way before that, but we were best friends.
You were three, right? Were you three in that leg?
I was third, yeah.
Yeah.
But, that was super cool. and I was in her wedding, and, you know, so it's like a really cool thing to be able to experience such a high level with one of your best friends, which is a special thing. And I appreciate that more now than I did, you know, 10 years ago. I would say one of my favorite moments, and this is cheesy, but it would probably be in the cafeteria when Usain Bolt just comes and sits at our table of like six swimmers, 6 girls. They just sat right across from us. We had no idea who he was. He hadn't done his race yet. His race was like 2 days later, the one where he did the whole like chest bump thing. So that was the first like big break on the scene of, I mean, he was always really good, or, you know, don't get me wrong. That was his first like media break, right? Where it was like, whoa, this guy. So of course, like 2 days later, we hear about this thing, we watch it, and we were like, wait, that was the guy that sat with lunch. We talked to him for like an hour about his life, culture, and all this stuff. And we're just sitting there like, no way. But that was super cool, because basically my point with that is that you meet so many insanely talented and wonderful people, and you don't even know it in the moment. Like, you're just in the moment, and people's names and hype and whoever they are and what they've done doesn't matter. You're just a human being. You're all there under the same roof in the village, trying to come together as a world to generate this positive movement, you know? So yeah, that was a really powerful experience, mainly because, you know, my mind would have gone to like, oh, they just think they're super cool, and like, they would never sit with us, you know, but like he did, and he didn't care, and he was trying to make friends, and he was like just a normal guy. So it was actually a really cool experience. It gave me a lot of respect for him. And I think he's a pretty respectable human being from what I understand. Just his lifestyle is, you know, he's got a lot that he does, but it's cool to see someone interact with us regular folk.
That's right. Well, listen, you know, he's probably saying the same story about you when you won your medal. So
I don't know about that.
No, well, let's just, you know, let's just kind of throw that in there. Maybe it did happen. When you talk about like the world doing great things, I can't think of a better segue to talk about Rise Athletes. How did what's the genesis of the platform? Who are you doing it with? Where are you guys at? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, right when I retired swimming, 2010, I went through a very dark period of just running and trying to find the next thing and doing all, you know, doing this and that and the other, and moving states and moving here and moving there. And it was a roller coaster ride. I didn't know my worth. I didn't know my identity. I had no clue. Something that the USOC and the NGBs are doing for the athletes now, obviously you watched Weight of Gold, maybe you've seen some documentaries on this, is better than what they've done then. It's getting better. Not to bash anyone or anything. They have a lot on their plate. Everyone's trying to figure it out. There's no ill will. But it's like, goodbye, cut, drop you off. And it was this whole thing where it was like, I have this gigantic identity, and I chose to be done when I know I could have kept going and kept swimming and made another team. But here I am, like, okay, now I'm done, and I have no identity. I have no idea who I am or what I'm doing or anything. I was not well for a very long time. I mean, I won't beat around the bush. I dropped 25 pounds. I wasn't eating well. I wasn't sleeping. I was waking up every night in night sweats and flashbacks from different things that had occurred in my career that were very painful and very hurtful. I didn't know if I wanted to live at a lot of points. I had no clue, you know, who I was as a person. I figured the world would be better off without me, you know, and I went through such a dark period. I ended up being I moved back home to Louisville, got my own place there because I didn't want to stay with my parents, and then
of course not.
went through some intensive therapy, and worked a lot on myself and tried to establish myself a little bit in that community. Through that process, I realized I wanted to make a change in all of this. It just wasn't cool. I was like, this isn't okay. And granted, I don't know what I'm doing with my life, but I still think that I can learn it and understand how to change it. So I went to grad school at University of Tennessee. So I was a trader from the University of Florida. Went to University of Tennessee, and I was still throughout that process, those almost 3 years there, I was still not well. Like I was still really thin, not doing well mental health wise, but I had a great community there. Like I had a wonderful group of people that were like my life blood. Like they were just like keeping me alive, honestly.
Yeah.
But I tend to do well, like we've spoken about before this podcast, with all of these things going on. I tend to still perform well as if nothing is going on, and everyone would be like, she's totally fine, she's just a little thin, or she's just not healthy, but she's totally like great, she has a great attitude, she's so fun, Burckle's wonderful. Meanwhile, I go home every day and I'm sobbing on my couch and I'm exhausted and I have no energy to get up, and I'm just, my adrenals are shot, and my body feels like traumatized. Like I was just exhausted all the time, was shut off from everybody, couldn't hold a relationship to save my life. I was just like, I can't function. And then I had this day where I was about to graduate, and I had this day where I was like, I know that something can change here. And on that same day, my teammate from 2008 Olympics, Rebecca Soni, who her and I had voice memoed a lot. We used to voice memo back and forth and just talk about how we felt. She was like, I don't want to just settle for, being like letting this world eat us up after this process. Like I have 8 gold medals and here I am, like, I don't know, she's like, I don't know what I want to do either, but I don't want this world to eat us up. I said, me neither. And then she called me back later and we ended up getting into a conversation about how she started FaceTiming with athletes and has created this program, like a course. She created a course because she was like, I want them to learn mindset now, and I was like, oh my God, like I'm finishing a sports psych master's where I've done this for 2.5 years. And here you are creating this, you have your positive psych degree and you're FaceTiming with athletes. And she was like, do you want to FaceTime with someone? I was like, sure. So that's literally how it started. I was like sitting in my parking lot, in my car, in my parking lot in Knoxville, Tennessee, and just agreed to this thing. And so the next week I had my first athlete. We like Skyped and then used Excel spreadsheet to track everything. It was so rogue, like totally, and I still have her to this day, 5 years later.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I get super emotional talking about that because like this little girl has essentially saved my life in a lot of ways. And I don't think she realizes that. And she'll say the same about me. And I'm like, I don't know how I did. Like, I feel like I've been a mess, but that's the beauty of being human, is that you can be figuring yourself out and also helping people and also like learning that what you're giving off, if it's a projection of what you need to work on, then you got to work on that. So that's the beauty of this. So anyway, that's my story about how it started. Rise is, it's a beautiful platform. It's all online. So we were COVID friendly right away. It's been a platform on the internet the entire time. So just like you and I are talking right now, it's Olympian to youth athlete talking on Zoom once a week for 30 minutes. And it's all on mindset and cultivating awareness around thought processes in sport so that they can transfer those to life as well. So obstacles, performance anxiety, we work on visualization, imagery, self-talk, all of these things.
Great.
So it's like having a big sister or big brother in your back pocket for these kids. And some of our mentors, we have almost 26 now, Olympic and professional athletes. Some of them have 20 athletes. Some of them have 2. So it's all up to them, depending on their schedule and their life, how much they want to give back. It is a program. It is, we're not a nonprofit or anything. Like, we are an actual program, and everyone's certified through us through a course and all that. So it's a really cool community and
beautiful.
Provides them with something to do. And again, back to what I was saying at the beginning, it provides them with a way to give back, provides the Olympians or professional athletes with a way to give back and a way to teach what they, have experienced and what they've gone through in their experiences as well. And allow the athlete to figure things out on their own by sharing their experiences as well. And then also provides this youth athlete with that mentor and that role model, and that human that can support them so much outside of sport and in sport. So that's my long spiel.
Caroline, one of the key things that you shared that I think is really important for people to understand is even for me, as I'm in recovery, and I've been in recovery for a number of years, when I have somebody come into the Fellowship of AA, which I'm a proud member of, or when I have somebody contact me and say, hey, I'm sorry, but can you help me? And I always say, listen, you don't understand what you're doing for me as a result of you asking for help. It almost takes me back to that time where I had to ask for help. And so there's no better way for me to go from being selfish. I mean, we're human. Sometimes we become self-indulging and become selfish. And it's the best way for me to go from being selfish to selfless.
Yeah.
So it's just a great point about how you have this young girl who I see you glow when you talk about her. It's fantastic. And you say, yeah, I don't know if she knows how important she is to my life. And I can so relate to that. And I always tell people, hey, man, when you're in this position where you find yourself complaining or you're reeling in, self-doubt, and almost like you're like trying to self-sabotage your behavior, you got to get out of self. That to me is literally the recipe to flipping that behavior on its head.
Yeah.
So I can totally relate to what you're saying there.
Yeah. And it's really difficult too, because I think we're such, as a doer, a lot of my life, you're like, I just got to do it. Then if you get out of yourself, you feel like you're not taking responsibility, and your story is, well, if I focus on other things, then I'm not responsible for myself. And then I'm just ignoring like being and figuring this out, and so you're trying to fix it. It's like you get in these mindsets where it's like, oh, that just must be giving up if I just get out of self. Right. And it's not, it's actually giving in and being able to turn towards something, which is a challenge. As an achiever, you want to not lose control, and you just grip it so hard that you're like, I can't let go of this. That's been a lesson as well. But yeah, I absolutely agree with what you're saying.
Caroline, what's next for Rise Athletes? What's like the 2-year plan? I mean, listen, 27, I go 25 mentors currently, within the organization. I can only imagine that's going to continue to grow, especially when you consider how important this is for youth, and as they develop, kind of this two-pronged approach to excel in their sport, but also excel in life. I think I'm a huge subscriber to this whole mentorship component. What's next for Rise Athletes?
Yeah, we're continuing to grow. We were very lucky in the beginning, and then it was a lot of organic growth, and now we're putting ourselves out there a lot more. So, growing our mentors, growing our athlete database, becoming more of a community and a culture. I think in a weird way, COVID actually brought to light how important connection even over the computer is. And as hard as it can be, and as challenging as it can be to sit on a computer all day, it's so incredibly helpful for people to know that that's an option to connect from anywhere, anytime. So our main goal is to continue creating that culture and that community. And yeah, Rebecca and I have some pretty lofty 5-year goals, but I think in the next 2 years, that's our main goal, is to 2x what we are now.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Where can, obviously, the subscribers, the listeners, where can they find you? Is there a webpage?
Yeah, I have my own website, which is carolynburckle.com. Rises is rise-athletes.com. I only use Instagram. I literally haven't checked any other social network in a really long time. I probably have a million Facebook things like asking to be on my timeline, and I have no idea what they are. So sorry guys, I really only use Instagram. And that's just because the creative in me doesn't feel creative when I'm on a million different platforms. I feel like I'm clouded with too much information. So I'm trying to streamline into one network and one channel. So, and my Instagram is Carol Burckle. So my own website, Rises, and then Rises Instagram and my Instagram are main places to find me.
Caroline, we, as busy as you are and as busy as I am, I'm just grateful for your time and just, the ability for you to share some of your struggles. We're in I guess in an environment now where I guess it's it's more acceptable to show the cracks in your armor. People tend to lean into people like myself and yourself because of that, right? There's this relatability component that allow people to be themselves around people like you and I. And so I was a big fan already. I'm a bigger fan of you now.
Thanks.
So thanks for your time and your consideration.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate you being patient with me as well in this entrepreneurial journey.
Thank you.